Of Natalee Holloway finally getting the answers they say they've longed for 18 years after that Alabama teen went missing in Aruba.
For 2 decades, the family of Natalee Holloway have suffered an excruciating emotional pain because of her passing. The prime suspect never admitted what he's accused of until long years of secrecy and cold-blood denial. However relieving his confession is, it's still not enough to bring back Natalee, a beloved daughter and a great friend. What could be worse than having the knowledge of how your child was brutally murdered? Now that everything's solved, join us as we uncover every piece of Natalee's case. Justice, finally. If you were around in the early 2000s, you probably remember Natalee Holloway's face. Her smile was on every news channel, her name in every headline. She was 18, just graduated from high school in Alabama, and on what was supposed to be a celebratory trip to Aruba with her classmates in May 2005. But what started as a sunny getaway turned into a nightmare, one that would haunt her family and captivate the public for the next 2 decades. For years, no one knew exactly what happened. There were rumors, suspects, dead ends, and countless media specials. Everyone had a theory. The case seemed frozen in time, a heartbreaking question mark that refused to be answered. At the center of that mystery was one man, Joran van der Sloot. He was the last person seen with Natalee, and he quickly became the prime suspect. But without a body or concrete evidence, nothing stuck. Fast forward to 2023, and suddenly, everything changed. Almost out of nowhere, in a quiet courtroom in Birmingham, Alabama, the truth finally came out. And it was even darker than most imagined. As part of a plea deal for unrelated extortion charges, Joran finally confessed. Not just to knowing what happened, but to killing her. According to his confession, he tried to make sexual advances toward Natalee on the beach. She rejected him, and he beat her to death with a cinder block, then pushed her body into the sea. Just like that. No drama, no mystery, just raw, awful truth. For Natalee's mom, Beth Holloway, the moment was as surreal as it was shattering. She had spent 18 years looking for answers, chasing leads that led nowhere, hoping for a breakthrough. And here it was, at last. Not from justice in Aruba, not from new evidence, but from the mouth of the man who had tormented her all these years. "It's over," she said. "Joran van der Sloot is no longer a suspect. He is the killer." There was a certain strength in her voice, but you could still hear the ache behind it. Closure is a tricky thing. Sometimes it brings peace, sometimes it reopens wounds. And if you're wondering why he was in court in Alabama at all, here's the wild part. It wasn't because of Natalee's murder. It was because in 2010, Joran tried to extort Beth Holloway for $250,000, offering to reveal where Natalee's body was in exchange for the cash. She gave him a down payment, and he gave her lies. That's what finally got him extradited from Peru, where he was already serving a 28-year sentence for murdering another woman, Stephanie Flores, in 2010. Turns out, he didn't just stop with Natalee. The confession. From the very beginning, van der Sloot played a central role in the mystery surrounding Holloway's disappearance. He was the last known person to be with Natalee on the night of May 30th, 2005, when the 18-year-old Alabama high school graduate vanished during a trip to Aruba. Almost immediately, his statements to police began to shift. Initially, he claimed that he and 2 friends had dropped Natalee off at her hotel. Then he changed the story, saying he left her on the beach. The inconsistencies in his accounts ignited public outrage and suspicion. But despite extensive searches and interrogations, no conclusive evidence emerged. Over the following years, Sloot continued to insert himself into the public eye, often offering sensational but unverifiable information about what happened that night. In 2008, Dutch crime reporter Peter R. de Vries secretly recorded Sloot appearing to admit to being present when Natalee died and disposing of her body. Yet when confronted, he dismissed the recording as a fabrication, a lie told to gain the trust of a supposed substance dealer. This became a pattern. Sloot would make confessions only to retract them, claiming they were falsehoods meant to trick, mislead, or capitalize on media attention. His motivations became increasingly suspect. In 2010, Sloot attempted to extort Natalee's mother, Beth Holloway, offering to reveal the location of Natalee's remains in exchange. After receiving a partial payment, he led her attorney to a house that turned out to be a false lead. This act finally led to federal charges in the U.S. for extortion and wire fraud, further painting Sloot not only as a manipulative figure, but as someone willing to commodify a mother's grief. The turning point came in 2023, nearly 20 years after Holloway's disappearance, when Sloot, facing extradition and charges in the U.S., delivered a confession that law enforcement described as credible and detailed. In his statement, he admitted that he had tried to sexually assault Natalee, and when she resisted, he became violent, striking her in the head with a cinder block and disposing of her body. This confession, unlike his previous ones, was part of a formal plea deal, making it legally binding and admissible. It marked the first time Sloot offered a narrative with enough corroborative detail to be deemed truthful by authorities. This final confession not only confirmed what many had suspected for years, but also exposed Sloot's manipulative tendencies in stark relief. He had toyed with the truth for nearly 2 decades, dragging a grieving family through a labyrinth of lies. The nature of his confession, cold, emotionless, and lacking remorse, offered insight into a deeply disturbed individual whose need for control and attention often overpowered his willingness to tell the truth. It wasn't just a revelation of guilt. It was the culmination of a long campaign of psychological warfare. Joran Sloot's confession in the Natalee Holloway case is less a moment of justice than it is a bitter confirmation. It closes a chapter, but offers little solace, as it underscores how long he withheld the truth and the pain he inflicted in the interim. The story is not just about a crime, it's about the manipulation of truth, the weaponization of uncertainty, and the eventual, belated exposure of a killer's conscience, long buried under layers of deceit. It was a long way till they got into the suspect's confession. Did you know there were multiple names involved besides Joran? On June 5th, Aruban authorities arrested 2 former security guards, Nick John and Abraham Jones, on suspicion of kidnapping and murdering Natalee Holloway. Both men had previously worked at the Allegro Hotel, which was closed for renovations at the time. Although officials never publicly explained the reason for their arrests, media reports suggested that statements made by Joran Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers may have influenced the decision. Additionally, it was reported that John and Jones were known to frequent hotel areas to meet women, and one had a prior encounter with the law. The 2 were held for over a week, but released on June 13th without being charged. Just days later, on June 9th, police arrested Joran Sloot and brothers Deepak and Satish Kalpoe on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. Under Aruban law, authorities can arrest someone based on a strong suspicion, but must continue to justify the detention with increasing evidence during judicial reviews. Deputy Police Chief Gerald Dompig later stated that these 3 had been the main focus of the investigation from early on. Police surveillance, phone tapping, and email monitoring began within 3 days of Holloway being reported missing. However, Dompig also noted that pressure from Holloway's family prompted authorities to act sooner than planned and arrest the suspects before gathering more evidence. On June 11th, David Cruz, spokesperson for the Aruban Minister of Justice, incorrectly announced that Natalee was dead and that authorities knew where her body was. He later retracted this statement, claiming he had been misinformed. That same evening, Dompig told the Associated Press that one of the suspects had admitted that something bad happened to Natalee after they took her to the beach, and that police were being led to the scene. The following day, prosecution officials neither confirmed nor denied this claim, only stating that the investigation had reached a critical phase. On June 17th, a sixth person, local disc jockey Steve Gregory Crows, was arrested after being implicated by one of the original suspects. Then, on June 22nd, Joran's father, Paulus van der Sloot, was detained for questioning and briefly arrested. Both Crows and Paulus were released on June 26th. Throughout this time, the stories told by the suspects shifted multiple times. All three eventually claimed that Joran and Natalee were dropped off at the beach near the Marriott Hotel, and that the Calpo brothers left them there. Joran initially said he left Natalee unharmed on the beach. According to Satish Calpo's attorney, Joran later called Deepak and texted him 40 minutes later to say he was walking home. In another version of events, Joran claimed he was dropped off at his home while the Calpo brothers drove away with Natalee, a story that police later dismissed. Dompig criticized this third account, suggesting that Joran only changed his story to deflect blame back onto the Calpo brothers after they started pointing fingers at him. He noted that the inconsistencies between their statements caused arguments between the suspects during court hearings. Dompig expressed confidence in the second version of the story, that Natalee and Joran were left at the beach near the Marriott Hotel. Following a judicial review, the Calpo brothers were released on July 4th, while van der Sloot remained in custody for an additional 60 days. On July 4th, 2005, the Royal Netherlands Air Force sent F-16 jets with infrared sensors to aid in the search for Natalee Holloway, but they found nothing. Later, in March 2006, satellite images were compared with newer photos to detect any changes in the landscape that might suggest a burial site. After a local gardener claimed he saw Joran van der Sloot and the Calpo brothers near the Aruba Racquet Club early on May 30th, a nearby pond was partially drained, but nothing was found. Another tip came from a jogger who said he saw men burying a blonde woman in a landfill that was already searched once. Authorities searched the landfill 3 more times with cadaver dogs, but again found no evidence. The FBI and Aruban police collaborated on the investigation, analyzing duct tape with blonde hair. However, testing showed the hair did not belong to Holloway. On August 26th, the Calpo brothers were rearrested along with Freddie Arambatsis, who was suspected in an unrelated case involving a minor. Dompig later admitted these arrests were meant to pressure the suspects into confessing, which failed. By September 2005, a judge ordered the release of all suspects who were required to remain available for questioning. All restrictions were lifted on September 14th. Joran van der Sloot gave several media interviews in the following months. On Fox News in March 2006, he claimed Holloway wanted to have sex, but he refused because he didn't have a condom. He said she chose to stay on the beach, and that his friend Satish picked him up around 3 a.m. However, Satish's lawyer claimed Satish had gone to bed and never picked Joran up that night. Joran admitted to initially lying, but claimed he did so because he thought Holloway would be found soon. In early 2006, the FBI re-interviewed Holloway's classmates, and Aruban police conducted more searches near the Marriott Hotel beach and sand dunes, none of which yielded results. Before stepping down from the case, Chief Gerald Dompig gave an interview stating he believed Holloway may have died from alcohol or substance poisoning and that her body was later hidden. He also claimed the investigation cost Aruba about $3 million. Holloway's family rejected any claims of substance use. On April 11, 2006, Natalee's father, Dave Holloway, released a book detailing the search for his daughter and accusing Aruban authorities of corruption and mismanagement. So, what are we left with now? For many, the case is solved. But it doesn't feel like a triumph. It feels more like a wound that never healed, only to be ripped open again. We finally got the answer, but it came from the worst possible person, in the worst possible way. There's no happy ending here, just a sense of grim resolution. How exactly did she die? Let's take a look according to Joran's words. The brutal death of Natalee. Natalee Holloway died in a violent and tragic way, according to the confession Joran van der Sloot finally gave in 2023. After years of lies and half-truths, he admitted that he killed her on the night she disappeared in Aruba back in 2005. In his statement, he said he was trying to sexually assault her, and when she refused and tried to fight him off, he became enraged. That's when he grabbed a cinder block and hit her in the head with it. The blow killed her instantly, according to his own words. What's especially disturbing is how calculated van der Sloot was even after the fact. He said he dragged her body to the ocean and got rid of it, which is why, despite massive searches over the years, her remains were never found. For almost 2 decades, he let her family suffer without closure, while he went on giving false confessions, changing his story repeatedly, and even tried to profit off their desperation by selling fake information about what happened to her. The details he gave in this final confession matched things authorities had suspected for years. It wasn't just another attention-seeking ploy. This time, the account was backed by specific facts that lined up with earlier investigations. And while it didn't bring Natalee back, it finally gave her family a heartbreaking answer they'd waited almost 20 years to hear. The question of whether Natalee Holloway's body will ever be retrieved has haunted her family, investigators, and the public for nearly 2 decades. Despite tireless efforts, numerous searches, and an international spotlight on the case, her remains have never been found. While recent developments, including Joran van der Sloot's long-awaited confession, have finally provided answers about what happened to her, the possibility of recovering her body remains painfully uncertain. According to van der Sloot's 2023 confession, Natalee was killed and her body disposed of in the ocean shortly after her disappearance. He claimed to have struck her in the head with a cinder block on the beach and then dragged her into the water. If this account is accurate, and authorities believe it likely is, it presents an enormous challenge to any hope of finding her remains. The ocean is vast and unforgiving. Tides, currents, and marine activity over nearly 20 years would have made preservation and recovery virtually impossible. In other words, even with the truth in hand, nature has likely erased the last physical trace of her. Over the years, many searches have been conducted in ponds, sand dunes, and even landfills, all based on tips, leads, or confessions, many of which turned out to be lies or dead ends. Cadaver dogs were brought in, ponds were drained, and satellite imaging was used to detect disturbed ground. The FBI even tested hair samples and duct tape, none of which ultimately led to Natalee. Each failed search not only deepened the mystery, but also emotionally drained those closest to her, especially her parents, who never stopped fighting for answers. The lack of a body meant there was no closure, not in a legal sense and certainly not emotionally. What makes this case so especially tragic is how it was shaped not just by a horrific crime, but by years of deceit. Joran van der Sloot's lies and manipulations significantly delayed the truth. He changed his story numerous times, gave false confessions, and even tried to extort money from Natalee's mother. With each new version of events, attention shifted, and investigators were forced to chase ghosts. The truth was always just out of reach. By the time a credible account came to light in 2023, the damage had already been done. Too much time had passed. Too many clues had likely been lost to time and nature. There is always a chance, no matter how slim, that her remains could still be found, perhaps by a diver, washed ashore, or during a future construction or excavation project. But most experts agree that, after all this time, it's unlikely. The ocean, if that's where she truly was left, offers very few second chances when it comes to recovering remains. Unlike a grave or a landfill, it doesn't preserve. It disperses. It's a heartbreaking reality that many families of ocean-related disappearances must face. Still, for Natalee's family, the final confession may represent the closest thing to closure they will ever get. Knowing what happened to her, even without being able to bring her home, is something. It's an answer they were denied for so long. While the physical recovery of her body may never happen, the truth, long buried by lies, has finally come to light. And sometimes, when the physical evidence is lost, the truth becomes the only form of justice left. Natalee didn't die in some mysterious way. There was no elaborate cover-up involving multiple people, and no hope that she had somehow survived. Her life was taken in a senseless act of violence by someone she had just met, and who then spent years cruelly hiding the truth. Even the process of solving the case was long and gruesome. Criticisms on investigation. The Twitty family and their supporters criticized what they saw as a lack of progress by Aruban authorities in the investigation. However, the Twitties themselves faced backlash for their actions on the island. Critics accused them of suppressing information that might cast Natalee Holloway in a negative light by encouraging her classmates not to speak about the case and by using media platforms to promote their own version of events. Claims the Twitties denied. Beth Twitty publicly alleged, both in media interviews and in her book, that Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers knew more about Natalee's disappearance than they had disclosed, and she claimed that at least one of them had sexually assaulted her daughter. On July 5, 2005, after the Kalpoe brothers were initially released from custody, Twitty said, "Two suspects were released yesterday who were involved in a violent crime against my daughter, and referred to them as criminals." That same evening, around 200 Arubans protested outside the courthouse in Oranjestad, holding signs that read, "Innocent until proven guilty," and "Respect our Dutch laws or go home." In response to Twitty's comments, Satish Kalpoe's attorney threatened legal action, calling the allegations prejudicial, inflammatory, libelous, and totally outrageous. On July 8th, Twitty issued a public statement expressing that her remarks were driven by despair and frustration, and she apologized to the Aruban people and authorities for any offense caused. In 2007, Beth Twitty published Loving Natalee, a mother's testament of hope and faith. That same year, she appeared on Nancy Grace, reiterating her belief that Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers were responsible for the crime. She emphasized the need to keep pushing for justice, saying, "If we give up, absolutely nothing will happen." After a Dutch television program by Peter R. de Vries aired video recordings implicating van der Sloot, Twitty maintained that the footage accurately depicted the events surrounding Natalee's disappearance. In an interview with the New York Post, she stated her belief that her daughter might still be alive if Sloot had sought help. She accused him of dumping Natalee's body, possibly while she was still alive, into the Caribbean Sea. Twitty also alleged that Joran had contacted his father, Paulus Sloot, who helped orchestrate the cover-up. The Holloway family further claimed that Sloot was receiving preferential treatment from the Aruban justice system. After a court ruled not to rearrest Sloot, Twitty remarked, "His life is a living hell," and later said, "I'd be good with a midnight express prison anywhere for Joran." In response to her daughter's disappearance, Twitty founded the International Safe Travels Foundation, a nonprofit aimed at educating the public on safer international travel. In May 2010, she announced the opening of the Natalee Holloway Resource Center at the National Museum of Crime and Punishment in Washington, D.C. The center, which opened on June 8th, was established to assist families of missing persons. Although the Holloways initially opposed a travel boycott of Aruba, they changed their stance by September 2005. Beth Twitty publicly urged Americans to avoid traveling to Aruba and other Dutch territories due to concerns about tourist safety. At a November 8th press conference, Alabama Governor Bob Riley and the Holloways called for a boycott. Riley also contacted other U.S. governors for support, with those from Georgia and Arkansas joining in. Philadelphia's City Council passed a resolution asking Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell to join the boycott, though he declined, and there was no federal endorsement. Some members of Alabama's congressional delegation supported the boycott, including both senators and Representative Spencer Backus. Senator Richard Shelby wrote to the American Society of Travel Agents expressing concerns for the safety of U.S. citizens in Aruba, stating, "We cannot trust that we will be protected while in Aruba." In response, Aruban Prime Minister Nelson Oduber defended the island's investigators and criticized the boycott as preposterous and irresponsible, saying, "We are not guerrillas. We are not terrorists. We don't pose a threat to the United States, nor to Alabama." Aruba's tourism and business communities, along with government officials, formed the Aruba Strategic Communications Task Force to counter negative portrayals of the island. The group, including representatives from the Aruba Hotel and Tourism Association and the Aruba Tourism Authority, issued statements and participated in media appearances to oppose the boycott and defend the island's handling of the case. Yes, the media had a huge role in the narratives, and even the press did not give justice to Natalee on the onset. Media coverage. When Natalee Holloway disappeared, it didn't take long for the media to latch onto the story, and then never let go. From the moment the Alabama teenager was reported missing, her face was everywhere. Cable news channels, especially in the U.S., ran the story around the clock. For weeks, and even months, it seemed like you couldn't turn on the TV without hearing Natalee's name. What started as a local missing persons case quickly blew up into an international media spectacle. A big part of why the case got so much attention was because it had all the elements the media tends to fixate on. A young, attractive white woman goes missing while on a high school graduation trip to a tropical island. It was a compelling narrative, and news networks leaned heavily into the emotional appeal. Natalee's mother, Beth Holloway, became a very public face of the search, tirelessly advocating for her daughter on shows like Nancy Grace, Larry King Live, and The Today Show. Her pain was raw, and her persistence in seeking answers made headlines repeatedly. The media followed her every move in Aruba, often in real time. Cable news, especially outlets like Fox News and CNN, played a massive role in turning the Holloway case into daily content. Shows ran segments that speculated endlessly about possible suspects, motives, and theories, many of which weren't based on verified facts. There were constant interviews with family members, friends, and even people who had no real connection to the case. Joran van der Sloot, the main suspect, became a household name largely because of this relentless media exposure. Some coverage even veered into tabloid territory, portraying him as the villain in a sort of made-for-TV drama. While the intense spotlight did help keep pressure on the Aruban authorities to keep the investigation going, it also sparked criticism. Many pointed out the disproportionate coverage Holloway received compared to other missing persons cases, particularly those involving people of color. The term missing white woman syndrome started gaining traction around this time, as people began to recognize the pattern of the media, focusing heavily on young, white, middle, or upper-class female victims while largely ignoring others. Aruban officials and locals also had a complicated relationship with the media frenzy. Some welcomed the attention at first, hoping it would help solve the case. But as time went on, frustrations grew. Aruban authorities were criticized both fairly and unfairly on air, and many locals felt their island was being unfairly portrayed. There was even a decline in tourism as a result of the negative press. The media coverage often suggested a level of corruption or incompetence in the local police force, which led to tension between U.S. media outlets and Aruban officials. Over time, the media narrative evolved from trying to solve Natalee's disappearance to examining the failings of the investigation itself. When new developments came up, even minor ones, they were blown up into breaking news. And every time Joran van der Sloot said something, whether it was a confession, a retraction, or another bizarre twist, it made front-page headlines. The media couldn't seem to let go of the case, and in a way, neither could the public. The story had become more than just a missing person. It was a media obsession. Even years later, every new piece of information, especially when van der Sloot was arrested for another murder in Peru, or when he was finally extradited to the U.S., brought the case back into the spotlight. Documentaries, true crime shows, and even dramatized TV specials kept Natalee's story in the public eye long after the daily news coverage faded. Platforms like Dateline NBC, 2020, and streaming services all revisited the case multiple times, trying to piece together what had really happened. In the end, the Natalee Holloway case became a turning point in how missing persons stories were covered by the media. It highlighted the power of public attention, the drawbacks of sensationalism, and the imbalance in how cases are chosen for mass coverage. While the media undoubtedly played a role in keeping the case alive and applying pressure on authorities, it also revealed some of the darker sides of news coverage, like bias, overexposure, and the blurring line between journalism and entertainment. Do you remember Natalee's case too? Let's hear from you in the comments section. Subscribe to the channel for more.